Namaste and welcome back, viewers. This is Mirror Prime. I'm Ashish Pareek. And again, we've got a very interesting debate lined up for you. Imagine walking through a bustling market in India, vibrant with colors, sounds, and smells. But then you glance down. What do you see? Plastic bags, wrappers, bottles all over the ground. And this is true from the smallest villages in India to the largest cities. This is the paradox of modern India, a country which is rich in culture and potential, yet we continue to drown in plastic waste. In fact, plastic has become a staple in our lives, from the bottles we drink from to the bags we carry. But what if I told you this love affair with plastic has now turned into a toxic relationship? In fact, the reason why I'm saying that is because India has now claimed the title of the world's biggest plastic polluter, emitting a staggering 9.3 million tons of plastic waste annually. In fact, this amount of plastic waste can fill an area equivalent to 604 Taj Mahals. This amount of plastic, to give you an idea, the total weight is the same as 1.55 million elephants. In fact, this isn't just about India. This is not just India's problem. It's a global crisis. A staggering 69% of the world's plastic waste emissions come from just 20 countries. But on our show today, we'll of course be focusing only on India, because the problem here is massive and the numbers clearly show that. Joining us right now on the broadcast are our guests today, Afroz Shah, who's an environment activist and also United Nations Environment Program awardee as well, Sandeep Chachra, who's a public policy expert, and also Jai Dhar Gupta, who's an environmentalist. Jai Dhar, I'll start with you now because I was told you were the first one to join the call here. With great power comes great responsibility, but looks like for India, with great population comes great pollution.
Look, we already carry the tag of being the country with the worst air pollution record in the world. This is now, we're now the tag of plastic being the largest plastic waste producer in the world. I mean, these are not the kind of accolades that we want to, collect. And I think the bigger point here is that, as the cost of living keeps going up in India, as your economies are kind of thriving and driving towards this $5 trillion economy goal, it doesn't really matter because your quality of life and living is just going downhill. So, at some point, we've got to balance out these development agendas with kind of a health and environment agenda. I think we are highly desensitized when it comes to health, hygiene outside, the four boundaries of our home. And that's a big problem. And that's a correction that needs to happen. I mean, it needs to happen yesterday.
Absolutely. Sandeep Chachra, we talk about the steps that have been taken by the government now. The first thing that comes to my mind is the ban on single-use plastics in 2022. 19 categories of single-use plastics were banned, but if you look at the actual figure, this only makes up 11% of single-use plastic. Rest of it still is available in the market. You go out there, you go to a local vendor, even today, even as we speak right now, you will still find single-use plastic. So at the end of the day, everything's done on paper, but on ground, everyone's still using single-use plastic.
No, it's a privilege to be here with such esteemed panelists and you, Ashish, and thank you for having me here. And let me just give a context as well, to the public policy question you asked. You see, the story of plastics in India, and I think globally, but we're speaking today of India, is the story of what's called trade-offs, tipping points, and transitions. Why trade-offs? Because one must put the context there, Ashish, clearly. You see, the consumption of plastics in India has grown roughly 23 times in the last 3 decades. So that's as far as consumption is concerned. Now, if you look at production, and if you look at how we are growing, we are estimated to grow from about 3.5 lakh, what is called crore rupees economy, to 10 lakh crore rupee economy in the next couple of years. So we are growing, and there's a huge global demand. So the economic engine is pushing. About 4 million people are in the plastics chain, if I may call it that, and that does not include the informal waste recycler. So it's a large economy. And I think in this large economy, one must recognize within it lies this whole question of what is really happening in terms of the flip side to it, which was being talked of by the earlier panelists. The flip side to it, we know. The flip side to it, we know that we have become the largest plastic waste generator in the country. Although we claim about 60% of what we create in terms of plastic waste is recycled, I'll come to that point, still remains a huge problem. I mean, there's a tipping point in terms of what the environmentalists were speaking, in terms of our health, in terms of ecology, from our bodies to our brains, from the flora to the fauna, the ecosystems per se. It's all plastic. Your visuals are showing it. So I think you need to sort of see that. And therefore, we need the question of what I call transitions and turning points. And that's where I'll come to. Why do we need it? It's a no-brainer. We want a zero net plastic waste by 2030. We know what kind of impact plastic waste is creating on us and our future generations. So there's no debate there. And I think public policy, the question is about these transitions and this whole question of implementation of these transitions. So the point of single-use plastics that you were talking to, Ashish, single-use plastics and the extended producer responsibility has been given a legal force in 2022. So, but the tardy implementation on the ground, you
I'll come to
yourself
that,
talked
Sandeep.
about.
I'll come to that. I'll come to the EPR now. I will of course discuss that as well. But meanwhile, let's also go across to Afroz Shah, who's of course also a United Nations Environment Program awardee as well. Afroz, now the UNEP data has now revealed that India mismanages 85% of the waste. So if you look at the total life cycle of plastic, we not just fail at containing it, we not just fail at the distribution stage, we also fail at the end stage. So it's a total failure that we're looking at, 85% mismanagement. And this data also, it's only the official data that we have. The overall figures could be much, much higher.
Let me tell you that, the problems everybody knows. It's a matter of first principle, it's a problem. See, plastic and single-use plastic, how it is produced, how is it consumed, and what is the end life cycle of it, it's a problem. But I would like to touch upon a different aspect. One of our panelists raised a thing about EPR. See, these problems are to be handled at different stages. I'll just come to the solution, and this I speak from 9 years of work at the ground. One is, what should we do at a systemic level? When I say systemic level, in terms of law, in terms of companies which produce plastic and companies which don't produce plastic. These are three categories at a systemic level. Then at an individual level, what we should do? What are the steps to be taken to mitigate this problem? I will have to tell you this whole problem is based on two caveats, which I want to put it out. One is we are too many on this planet. We must understand it. This planet is overflowing with people. And number two, very important is we talk a lot and we do less. That has again created a problem. When I say we, it means the system, the individual and everybody. And third, very important aspect, this problem is in a socio-economic phenomena right now. I wish it was purely economic phenomena where government policies would say, sort it out, and we would sort it out. It's a purely socio-economic phenomena, and when you give a fact to the socio-economic phenomena, all these laws which you saw at this point are directed against what I call the EPR policy. Under EPR policy, kg versus kg. That means if a plastic producer has produced 1 kg of plastic, he must take 1 kg back, how he's produced it. He must recycle it. But we know 1 kg of PET bottle is different from a 1 kg of multi-layer packaging. It is different from 1 kg of biscuit packets. So there where the EPR is funding. You see, it is too huge a problem. And if we say right now that we'll solve it through law, it will be a correct assumption. I say it from my experience of 9 years working with millions of people at the ground. And if we say that no law should be there and only people should be solving it or companies, that's also a wrong assumption. It has to be a collaboration. And as we say in English language, we must put up the right question and you will get a right answer. And if you have a wrong question, you will get a wrong answer.
Absolutely.
First of all, this problem in a socio-economic zone. Then if you say, when you say that, are you asking yourself, can law only tackle it?
Like you rightly pointed,
with the EPR law,
this has to be a collaborative effort as well.
Now.
And this is a big problem that everyone needs to talk about as well. And also, like you rightly pointed out, everyone needs to contribute to it as well. For example, we see a lot of people talking about how there's a lot of waste and plastic on the road while holding a carry bag, which is also part of the single-use plastic problem. Jai Dhar Gupta, this issue is just unrelenting. Now, carry bags, I'm talking about, the government raised the minimum thickness requirement from 50 microns to 75 microns in 2021. This was further raised to 120 microns. Even now, 1/3 of this entire mess, the single-use plastic mess, it is all carry bag. And we see this even now if you go out, all the local vendors still use the same thing. So no matter how many laws you make on paper, what changes you make, until you actually sensitize people about it, until you do something on ground, nothing's going to change.
The problem in our country has always been enforcement. And it's with everything health related, everything environment related. It always comes back to enforcement. I mean, from an air pollution point of view, which is my subject actually, I'm a clean air activist. There's a ban on burning of waste. There's a ban of burning of agri waste, but it's rampant. It's all over the country. That's the only way to manage waste in most parts of this country. But on the question of solid waste management, if I look at all of our cities, if I even look at the national capital region, why don't we have segregation at source? I mean, that's just a starting point. I'm seeing a lot of communities in
Correct.
Gurgaon and Delhi, a lot of these multi-dwelling units that are starting to do it. It's the leadership is coming from within those communities, but it's not coming from a government level. So it's a failure again of leadership and governance at a government level. There is no movement. We are seeing mountains of
Correct.
waste, and these mountains of waste also lead to cancer and respiratory illnesses, leachate, hydrogen sulfide, all kinds of toxicity in our immediate environments. And these are urban environments where the density per square mile,
Absolutely.
we're talking about
But
hundreds of thousands of
why
people.
isn't the government doing it? If the government already knows the problem, the big question is, why isn't the government doing it? Sandeep Chachra, I think one of the questions that I was discussing this issue with someone, and one of the things they pointed out was the problematic thing here is that the Indian government only regulates. It doesn't ban. For example, the focus, again, it comes back to single-use plastic. Countries like Rwanda, Tanzania, even weaker economies like that have already banned single-use plastic. Why cannot we do that in India? Why can't we just ban it?
I think, yes, bans are welcome. And I think single-use plastics need to see that end, ban use. I think the point that the government of India has pushed is the question of reusability and increasing the durability. So you're talking of thickness of plastic bags, but also other stuff like that. So I think that's something which is needed to be done. You were talking of the fact that it is not only the law, it is also a social responsibility. So social conscientization has helped. I think if you look at last 10 years, in our schools, in our communities, a lot more of us, even in rural areas and urban areas, are a lot more conscious that let's avoid plastic. And I think that needs to go hand in hand. But having said this, one also sort of needs to look at, Ashish, what you were pointing to the question, the problem there, the recycling problem, the waste collection problem. And that integration needs to happen. You see, most unrecognized in the plastic circular chain, and I think the circularity of plastics value chain needs to be increased. But most important are the people, the rag pickers in our cities who are collecting plastic waste. They are unrecognized, they're totally unacknowledged, and live in precarity. And I think they do a valuable service. And I think the more we recognize, the more we ecologically and economically value their services, the better we will become in terms of plastic waste collection. And of course, recycling is another question that we need to handle. We need to set up better recycling technologies. We don't have.
Absolutely.
57%, if I may say to the previous speaker, of the waste is burnt, and that includes plastic. And the toxicity it produces. And I think that technology is also needed. We need to create incentives, market incentives to producers, to plastic recyclers,
Absolutely.
in order to do it better.
Very good point there, Sandeep, because this is exactly what I was coming to now. Afroz, this is now a point that I was actually going to talk about, is the fact that the alternatives, I mean, we can talk about 100 things as to why someone shouldn't be using a carry bag that's of a single-use plastic. But if that person has it as the cheapest option available in the market, if he finds no alternative, he is going to use it, no matter how much you educate him about how much effect it's having on the environment. That is going to be the item that he uses. But again, the focus has to be on incentivizing the industries that are actually looking at alternative solutions. The entire alternative market is underdeveloped. We are doing nothing to develop it. And whatever is available is also costlier than all of these single-use plastics.
See, I'll put it two ways. The first is, in law we say that as lawyers, necessity knows no law. And plastic consumption falls in that at this point of time. If you don't have anything else to do, you latch onto a 50 micron plastic. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is, even if you incentivize, I'll give an example practically of what we do at the ground level. Milk pouches. Take an example of milk pouches. It's a monomaterial, LDPE. Each milk pouch of half a liter will be around 3.1 grams. And if you have to recycle it, you will have to collect 1 kg, which will fetch you, say, around 15 rupees. For that, you'll have to collect 300 pieces of milk pouches throughout the year. Milk pouches, you have to wash it and keep. You require water because milk starts smelling. Now, how do you persuade an individual who's staying in a city like Mumbai, dense city in a slum, that you please keep it? We tried doing it many times. We taught them how to wash it. The first step was good, lot done. But the second step of saying that, can you keep in your small house, which is 10 by 10? So these are all practical problems which I bring on the table. This whole discussion is a very, very wide discussion. It may not be over in 15, 20 minutes of a conversation. But one thing I can tell you, the moment you say it's a socio-economic problem, multiple activities will have to be launched at the legal level and at the social level. If you need, we are 1.5 billion in India, and it's not a small amount of number of people up. You would not only use huge infrastructure, huge amount of people stepping up, huge amount of community involvement. And all this will have to be not treated in silos, but there'll have to be a collaborative effort. Like take, for example, now plastic companies. Under EPR, they're bound to take the plastic back. In one line, I'll tell you. And now they have defined percentage per year will do that. But if you see the basic flaw with that EPR policy, as a lawyer, I must tell you, kg versus kg. That means you produce 100 kg, take 100 kg back. Now we know 100 kg of PET bottle is different from 100 kg of MLP. I'll give you what I call economic retrieval of cost.
Correct.
To pluck out 1 kg of PET bottle from Mother Nature of any house is X amount. But if you want to pluck out 100 kg of small packets, which are not even of 1 gram, the economic retrieval cost reaches 400 rupees per kg. Now, all this will have to be factored in a law. First of all, if you make the law good, then it will work. Second, you know, a law is as good as the obedience to the law. You may make a great law if people are not obeying. What happens? In a slum, they need their food, they need their milk pouches, they want their cup of tea early morning. How do you tell them that you must have a ban, you must have this? So these are complex social issues. You know, I work around 500,000 people in Mumbai, okay, at different locations, and our experience tells us the more you make the community aware about it, at the community level, changes will happen. At the company level, where companies are producing plastic, the law must be tweaked at this point. I mean, it needs to be tweaked. There's a problem with the law. You can't do kg versus kg. There is a big problem because 100 kg of PET and 100 kg of multi-layer packaging are on different ballgame. Then the third is the involvement of pollution control boards also while enforcing it. Just 6 months back, we had 4 companies of recycling penalized because they were generating papers. They were penalized heavily. They were just generating papers saying that we are recycling it. Fourth, clean plastic can be recycled. Right. Contaminated plastic cannot be recycled because we don't have the wherewithal to wash it at this point of time. And neither the people who are carrying this contaminated plastic to the recycling center can do it. So these are some of the points. You know, this 20 minutes is too short, but to tell you the fact, it's a big problem.
Absolutely.
The solutions are very nearby.
I totally agree with you. It's a very short duration to have a discussion as wide as this.
We can
keep talking about multiple points, and I don't think...
Just one line I want to...
Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to add one line I want to add it. Every person in this country, if you go home and check your garbage, if your garbage is wrong, we are unfit for this planet. And if your garbage is right, we are fit for this planet. That must be the deciding line of how we function as a nation, as a global citizen. And this is what we see day on, consumers making wrong choices, plastic producers designing the packaging wrong, recycling industry relying on that 9% recycling rate to tom-tom everywhere, that how great we are doing it. We have all got it wrong at this point of time. Hence you see our lakes, our rivers, our oceans, our forests, all are drowning in plastic. Nothing remains for the next generation to enjoy.
Absolutely.
So it's a complex problem. It's a complex socio-economic problem. Yeah, and we need to tackle it.
It's definitely a complex problem.
Humans are good, we will be able to tackle it.
I'll go across to Jai Dhar now, because you raised a very important point about how it's a responsibility of everyone. Jai Dhar, as we can understand, a lot of industries for example, packaging and retail, they might actually try to, find different ways around the entire thing. For example, the entire ARP thing that also Afroz spoke about how this is being tweaked. The laws also are being bypassed openly, and nobody's doing anything about it. And they're, of course, doing it because of their logistical issues, operational issues, and at the end of the day, it's all about profitability. But again, laws, how do we change the laws to ensure that everyone who is contributing to this waste also is responsible for managing it, also is responsible for ensuring that whatever they're putting out there, they take it back? Jaidar, I think your video is mute. Jaidar, unmute yourself,
Yes,
please.
I want to defer to what Afroz just said. I think at the end of the day, the power rests with the consumer. If we stop consuming these items that are there with the plastic pack, single serve plastic packaging or with the Tetra packs and whatnot, I think these for profit companies will change behavior and look for alternatives very, very quickly. So if the consumers see this as a problem, if they see their quality of life deteriorating, if they see more microplastics in the air, food, and water, which are showing up, these are nanoplastics that are showing up everywhere, including our own bodies at this time. There have been some recent studies that just came out. This is a huge problem that needs to be addressed, and the greatest power rests with the consumer. So, the consumer needs to lead on this because we've clearly seen that, there's no leadership from government. There's a lack of governance on anything related to health and environment.
Absolutely. Also, now going across to Sandeep Chachra. Now, Sandeep, we are talking about how the 2022 ban, it was just limited to 19 categories of single-use plastics. And again, like I earlier said, this only contained about 11% of the total single-use plastic that's used across the nation. So how do we solve this issue now? Because we are talking about the problem, we are talking about how there's no alternatives, the different technology is also not being incentivized in the nation. What's the solution?
There are three steps that I'd like to sort of propose. The first is, of course, social leadership in advancing law is needed. So, social conscientization, Afroz was speaking to it, and the other panelists was also speaking to it, Jayadar. So I think if we empower communities to take action, push communities to take action, recognize the ecological service that they do in taking action, that goes a long way in setting up the social context where social action concurs with what the law also has a function, by the way, to push the societies in a progressive manner. So I'd like to see that as an interrelation. So that's one. Two, the alternative question needs to be much better researched. Much more funding, infrastructure support needs to be available in developing what is called the alternatives. I mean, we can keep bashing plastics, but end of the day, that's what people end up using because that's affordable, that's possible, that's available. There are many issues there. The industries keep on using it. So a lot more investment needs to go into what can be called, there's also the biodegradable stuff and there's also this bioplastics. They all have a lot of limitations. So we need to figure out which are the alternate technologies, which when I talked of transition points, the ecological transition points, that investment is not forthcoming. A lot of emphasis right now is how to finish plastics. A lot more needs to happen, and this goes to our national campaign on what in terms of lifestyle changes we need, what at the consumer level we need, how we need to reimagine our consumption patterns. It's a question which the Honorable Prime Minister has launched by the way of the Life campaign to look at how we sort of socially behave, how we sort of socially live, and make ecological transitions at the individual and more importantly, the social levels, societal levels. But equally importantly, we need to invest, and that is where the challenge is.
Correct.
Into alternative pathways and futures. And that R&D, research and development, is completely inadequate. I think India has the historic opportunity and a compulsion to lead that pathway. I think the point is not just about how do we sort of ban plastics, how do we end plastic. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the next 10 years. So let's be socially responsible on those transition pathways and spend a lot more time and energy in discussing what are those transition pathways. Some have been outlined by Afroz and by Jai Dhar ji. on the show today.
Absolutely. Sandeep, like you rightly pointed out, a lot of time and energy is being spent, but the problem here is that there's no concerted effort. I think the only change is the real change is only going to happen when you actually look at a stronger law. There's a stronger law in place. There are more responsible citizens, and also there are companies that are also held accountable. So like Afroz earlier said, it has to be a collaborative effort, and that is exactly how we come out of this mess. And gentlemen, really appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Unfortunately, running out of time here, but a very insightful discussion here talking about different aspects of plastic pollution and what exactly is making India now infamously the champion of plastic pollution across the world. That's it on this broadcast. Lots more lined up on the other side. Stay tuned.